I just want to say, I think we both know what the solution is for the Pacers. It's to build a time machine and go back and trade for OG Anunoby instead of Pascal Siakam. I can't.
Oh my God! Yeah,
I can't believe it. I can't believe they were like I'm just picturing like a world where you're like a low level assistant in the front office, and the GM comes in and he's like, guys, we're looking at a Toronto Raptors, and you're like, fuck yes. And they're like, Pascal Siakam, and you're just like looking around for the cameras like, no, wrong guy. You know, like the Walter White meme in the car. No.
Oh man. This is Hot Hand Theory. This is a podcast where we talk about the NBA and break things down from an analytical perspective. I'm your co-host XJ. As always, he is my brilliant co-host Geoff. Geoff, the New York Knicks defeat the Indiana Pacers 121-91, only 2 days after losing to the Pacers 121-89. So much to talk about, so much to break down about this Knicks Pacers series. Where do you want to start, man? Where do you want to start?
I think we should start with Precious Achiuwa at the power forward. Like, do we just dive right into the victory lapping? Do we get that out of the way, or do we? No, I mean, we got to start with Deuce McBride, right? Like, he hops into the starting lineup. I think I should just turn it back over to you. I mean, you were the loudest. You were the most. You've always been the most sure about the value of spacing. To me, this felt pretty obviously blatant. I don't really know why the Knicks even tried what they tried first. And so there is a lot of like, oh, Thibs got it right. And to me, I'm still kind of like, he got it right 3 games late. The Knicks didn't have to punt games 3 and 4. You know, they almost won game 3. But I don't know. How are you feeling about this? Because I'm most of it as a Knicks fan, you have to feel good about being up 3-2. But, you know, I did pick the Knicks to win in 5 at the start of the series. I do feel like even without OG Anunoby, they're the better team. And yeah, I mean, I didn't expect the Knicks to come out and wash the Pacers like they did last night. But it is quite clear to me that when you put a guy like Jalen Brunson in more optimal spacing environments, he's going to do things like he did last night. And I thought Deuce McBride was a big part of that.
Yeah, of course, I 100% agree with you. Just as a basic fundamental position, spacing, I believe, is essential in the modern NBA. Like you can't have 3 poor shooters or 3 non-shooters on the court all at the same time. It's simply not a viable strategy. And we saw it be effective in a short sample size early in the season for the Knicks. Largely, in my opinion, because teams were just not ready and expecting that kind of lineup to be rolled out in 2024. Like, they treated guys like Precious Achiuwa and, you know, even Josh Hart, who shot 30% from 3 in the regular season, they treated those guys like threats from the 3-point line. So if you're going to treat those guys like threats, then yeah, it'll work. It'll be fine. But once teams adjusted, and it really started, I think, with Philadelphia, the Lakers did it against the Knicks. Philadelphia really kind of drove it home. Once they adjusted and said, oh, wait, we don't have to guard these guys out of the 3-point line. We can completely stop you from getting deep into the paint. We all know that a Tom Thibodeau defense wants to protect the paint first and foremost, and there's a great reason for that. Shots in the paint, shots close to the rim are the most valuable shots in the entire NBA that you can possibly get, aside from free throws. They're even more valuable than open 3-pointers. So, of course, you want to protect the rim. And by having non-shooters on the court, you allow the defense to more easily protect the rim and not pay for it. The 3-point shots are a penalty for protecting the rim. The 3-point shots aren't the objective. The 3-point shots are, okay, you're going to do this thing. You're going to stop me from getting to the most valuable shot. I have a penalty for you, and it's going to be via the second most valuable shot. And so, you know, it's just, to me, very clear that that's just not a viable strategy long term, and especially in a playoff series where teams are very, very deep into their detailed game plans and they're adjusting from game to game. You're not going to be able to get away with it. The Knicks didn't get away with it, And Thibs, to his credit, and I'm reluctant to give credit for these kinds of things, credit for things that I think should have happened anyway. But I will give credit with regard to just almost on a relative basis for going to this lineup that was clearly going to be more effective. Immediately, the Knicks had a 38-point quarter, tied for their best quarter or highest point scoring quarter in the entire series. And it was super effective all night. It was super effective all night because it wasn't just Deuce McBride inserted into the starting lineup for Precious Achiuwa, but it was making sure that at no point in time, or very few points in time, there were lineups out there where the Knicks had 3 poor or non-shooters on the court all at the same time. It was limited to 2, and oftentimes it was only 1 via a center. And so that spacing allowed the Knicks to completely devastate the Indiana Pacers. And it had some ramifications for their defense too, in some ways that aren't really obvious to the eye, that I want to point out later. But that's really my overall thought. I think it was the right move. It was very effective. The right move doesn't always end up being in the best result. Like, we're very process over results oriented here. It so happened that the right process resulted in the best result. So I think that that's what we saw.
And let's talk about a really important thing that you just said, the domino effect created by moving Precious Achiuwa to the bench. It wasn't just reducing and limiting his minutes at power forward. It was, okay, now he's coming off the bench. When he's the backup power forward, who is he coming in for? It's not starting the game next to Josh Hart. He's coming in for Josh Hart. So he's sharing the court with Brunson, with DiVincenzo, with Deuce, with Alec Burks, with guys who are more comfortable shooters. It's not great. It's not optimal, of course, but it is manageable for short stretches to have him playing power forward if you have 3 other shooters at the court or on the court. It was not tenable to have him start the game next to Josh Hart and a center at power forward. That was just an untenable solution, and that was the point. It was all these different things that moving Precious Achiuwa to the bench does. It got rid of the Jericho Sims minutes. Jericho Sims didn't play last night because now with Precious Achiuwa coming off the bench, Tom Thibodeau doesn't feel ever like he has to rest both Achiuwa or Hartenstein, or have Precious at power forward because he needs to rest Josh Hart. And then, oh God, Hartenstein's resting. I need a center. Jericho Sims is in. Precious Achiuwa played most of his minutes at center. He was super effective. You talked about it today on Twitter. He has a ton of viability as a backup center. He can switch, he can rebound, he can rim run when he's the only non-shooter on the floor. And yes, for as much as we talk about Josh Hart shooting, when Josh Hart is playing power forward as a small power forward, he's not a great shooter. He's not a top tier stretch power forward, but he is a viable power forward. All of a sudden, Jalen Brunson running the offense, Dante DiVincenzo, Deuce McBride, these are things you can work with. You can work around these limitations. Precious Achiuwa starting at power forward with Josh Hart and Isaiah Hartenstein, there were no workarounds. The hole was too big.
Absolutely. And to be completely fair, so let's just say something up front, because I think this is like really, for some reason, it's not implicit. And so I feel like the need to say it. There are obviously trade-offs to everything. Every decision that you can make for a basketball team as a coach in terms of who you play, what your rotations are, there are trade-offs to all of it. You mentioned a lot of it. The positive trade-offs of having Precious Achiuwa come off the bench as a backup 5 primarily. They're just trade-offs to every decision you can make. And so that is implied. We all know that. We're all starting from that same foundation. Being small or undersized does leave you vulnerable to certain things. Potentially, your defensive matchups aren't as good. You'll have trouble defending, bigger wings like Pascal Siakam, who can score in the interior and from the mid-range with pretty good efficiency. Guys like Miles Turner, who can shoot over smaller guys. Potentially defensive rebounding and offensive rebounding. You'll lose some of your advantage there. Being small leaves you vulnerable to some of these things. At the same time, we recognize the trade-offs. It's much better to not have enough size than it is to not have enough shooting. Like, that is not really in my opinion, a conversation in 2024 as far as like where we are with basketball. Maybe in the 90s, maybe in the early 2000s, those things would be conversations to be had. At this point, where things are completely heightened in terms of the efficiency, where analytics are playing such a big role, where offenses are completely out of control, there's record-breaking offenses every single year. It is much better and much more important to have enough shooting than it is to have enough size. And the reason for that is that basketball is about putting the ball in the hoop, and you get a huge premium for it when you do it from far away. That is the baseline. You put the ball in the hoop, and guess what? If you can do it from 23 feet out or 24 feet out, you get extra points for it. And all teams know that. And so the value of that shot is so critical that, yes, if you're going to give up post touches to Siakam, who is very efficient in the mid-range for sure, and he is going to be a problem for a guy like Josh Hart to guard. That is not, there's no discounting of that being an issue. There's no saying like, Josh Hart will hold him to 10 of 25 shooting. It'll be like, no, he's going to have a good game typically. Or if Josh Hart does, as you suggested, it ends up guarding Miles Turner, you may pay a consequence for that. Maybe Miles Turner is going to get some threes over the top. Maybe Miles Turner is going to get into the post and score with some decent efficiency. All of those things are viable things to happen, but the trade-offs are not on the side of worrying about that over not having enough space for your best player, one of the best scorers in the world, to be able to have an advantage when he's attacking, for you to have the opportunity to hit 3-point shots to cash in when the defense is overcompensating to stop your best player. Those things are much more important than the things that you're losing on the other end. And I think that's, at this point, in the modern NBA, almost an objective truth at this stage. So that is where I think that's definitely where I'm at. I believe that's where you're at. And I think that's some of the reason for this, in terms of looking at those trade-offs, acknowledging those trade-offs, but coming clearly on one side over the other. And that is that shooting is much more important. That's my last thought on this topic. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add.
I just want to say that regarding trade-offs, I made that thread the other day, and there was a surprising amount of pushback when I said that I would put Josh Hart on Miles Turner and put Hartenstein on Siakam. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm 100% sure that I'm right. I'm never 100% sure that I'm right. Even if I speak like I am, I'm always cognizant and aware of the fact that I could be wrong. And I hope that people who listen to this believe me and understand that that's underlying in everything that I say. But I didn't like the supposition that there were potential negatives that I hadn't thought of, because the insinuation there is that I'm implying that it's just 100% positive in my assessment or my assertion. And that's not true. It's never true. There's nothing that's 100-0, and there's nothing that's 0-100. Even Precious Achiuwa playing power forward, I can be as overwhelmingly lambastic in my and how profuse I am in hating it, but that doesn't mean there are zero positive qualities of it.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with all that. I appreciate the caveats that you were giving about like never having a certainty about your perspective, which I totally agree with. It's more about probabilities, right? Like, so you could imagine putting out a lineup that's bigger and that perform better than a lineup that can shoot better, all things equal, but it's not about whether it happens in that one instance or not. It's about what's more likely to happen. And that is kind of what underpins a lot of these perspectives, is what is more likely to happen given the information that we have. And we kind of have to go with that, even if we could imagine it going the other way, which is also possible. I think one thing I wanted to mention is just something that I noticed. It's just kind of an off the cuff comment that I thought about, was the Pacers completely blew out the Knicks, won by 31 points or 32 points the other day, and then came back and lost by 30 points. And I think that what you see when these things happen is that people, fan bases, typically, pundits, they start to panic when teams get blown out in the playoffs. I feel like it's important to note that statistically games are disproportionately blowouts in the playoffs. it's not necessarily meaningful if your team gets blown out. Because we'll see a team like the Celtics get blown out against the Heat or the Cavs, and everyone overreacts. Oh my God, they're in trouble now. This is actually just par for the course. And again, we see this statistically. I'm not sure of the reasons. No one's like really sure of the reasons. It could be because in the playoffs, teams don't take their foot off the gas as they do in the regular season, allowing teams to kind of come back. There's less of a rubber band effect in that way. It could be because defenses are more locked in. Typically comebacks happen when defenses are lax, not when offenses go stagnant. So the Knicks were blown out in game 4 and they just blew out the Pacers. And I think that it feels a little bit insane to say, you implied this earlier, I think the Knicks are clearly the better team with or without Julius Randle, Mitchell Robinson, and somehow someone who we both agree, I think, is the Knicks' second most important player, OG Anunoby. Despite all of that, and despite the 2 blowouts that we've seen on either side, I think the Knicks are clearly the better team over Indiana. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I just think that Brunson surrounded by good additive role players is a formula for success that Indiana can't quite match right now. I don't think Indiana is as well-fitting or synergistic a team. I think the addition of Siakam has been clunky, as you predicted. I think that sometimes they look like they're closer to their truer selves when Obi is in Siakam's spot and they're just 5 out with Turner at center and they've got Haliburton running the show and it's tons of pace, tons of ball movement, tons of man movement. But the Pacers just don't deploy that lineup often enough. Look, Siakam's there they traded for him. He's going to get a big extension. They have to figure out a way to put the 2 styles together, to merge the 2 styles, because Siakam in and of himself is a very good basketball player. But for him to be a very good basketball player on Indiana in a way that raises their ceiling, he has to shoot more. He has to shoot more effectively. And he has to be more willing to push the ball in transition. And we haven't seen that a ton in this series. I will say, this isn't me playing devil's advocate, but I think the Pacers are going to come out really strong in game 6. I think their back's against the wall. I think they kind of know they have to win this series. I'd imagine it feels that way to them because, look, you're the Indiana Pacers. You know you're without Benedict Mathurin. But besides Mathurin, this is your team. And when you extend Siakam and you have Turner and you're going to pay Haliburton a lot, Haliburton's going to get paid a lot of money for a long time, you can make improvements at the margins. But for the most part, this is your core. And if you can't beat this Knicks team, this young Knicks team, without OG Anunoby and without Julius Randle, without Mitchell Robinson, without their best bench shooter, how can you have any confidence going forward that you're going to – where does that confidence lie? I mean, Tyrese Haliburton, he can get better, I guess. There are definitely areas for Tyrese Haliburton to get better. We saw it last night. That was one of the quietest games you'll see from an all-star level player in that sort of game. And the thing is like, this isn't lambasting him, but that's just the type of player he is sometimes. And he's going to have games like that because he's not the type to take 35 shots in a game like Jalen Brunson. That doesn't make him any worse or any better in a vacuum. It's just a stylistic difference. And sometimes you need your best player to just take control of the wheel and get you to that spot. And Haliburton is always going to be, not always, he has always been the type to take what the defense gives him. If there's nothing there for him, he's going to trust his teammates. And that's great. That's part of why over the totality of a regular season, offenses with Tyrese Haliburton are so impactful and so good because he moves the ball around. He gets his players in their ideal spaces and gets them to shoot where they want to shoot. But last night called for something different. So if you want an area where Tyrese Haliburton can improve, it's, look, you beat your guy. You got to 15 feet from the hoop. You're in the 97th percentile at shooting from the mid-range. Just shoot the fucking ball, dude. Shoot from the mid-range. Take that shot that you're really good at shooting. You don't need to dance and restart the possession, and then now it's 8 seconds left on the shot clock, and you're just starting from where you just were 10 feet beyond the three-point line.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add one more thing about Halliburton. His defense this series, it's somehow been worse than average. Like he does not. I don't know. He has the physical tools. Like he's tall. You see him get steals, and he obviously has great like hand-eye coordination and instincts. But sometimes the effort just is not there. So if you want another area where Halliburton can improve, I mean, you see Carlisle moving him off the ball more, especially next to TJ McConnell. Maybe save just like a tiny bit of that energy so he can give something defensively, because you watch the Pacers play and it really feels like they're playing 4-on-5 defensively sometimes.
Man, I 100% agree with everything you said, including your Halliburton evaluation. I think if you're the Pacers, you have to sign Pascal Siakam to a max deal. You're stuck. You're stuck. This is your team. Like, you have to do it now because you traded assets for him. And although it's a sunk cost, you're going to look crazy if you don't do it. And so now this is your squad. And so if your means of improvement is Tyrese Halliburton get better, or Tyrese Halliburton play at the MVP level that he played at for the first 30 games of the season, that's a rough path to improvement. Yeah, I just don't, I can't anticipate that happening in a sustainable way. And if it does, it's probably not with Pascal Siakam on the court. Like Pascal Siakam does not serve Tyrese Halliburton in maximizing his ability and his skill set and his impact on the game. So you have this clunky fit. You have this situation where you have to maintain this clunky fit. You don't have a real means to acquire any other kind of superstar to offset or to elevate these two guys. You're in a really tough situation. I agree with you. They have to win this series. They have to feel like they have to win this series, because you can't lose to this Knicks team that is missing like 3 of their best, like 7 or 8 players. And, their second and probably second and third best players, depending on who you ask, maybe second and fourth best players. But it's just, regardless, you can't, you can't lose this series. It's just a horrible situation for Indiana. I will say, in my opinion, we talk about clone theory a lot. I think that in some way, Pascal Siakam is sort of a Halliburton clone in terms of their redundancy. I sent you, a picture, a screenshot of the Pacers in one alignment when they had Siakam playing the 5. It was Siakam with the ball in the middle of the court with shooters spread out all around him. TJ McConnell in one corner, who, is a reluctant shooter, but from the corner is lethal and shot 40% overall from 3 with that shorter porch in the corner. He can knock down shots. Ben Shepherd in the other corner, Tyrese Halliburton spacing from far out above the break, and Obi Toppin spacing in the other above the break on the other side. And Pascal Siakam with the ball attacking a completely wide open hoop. That is so difficult to guard. And it's really rough, because in order to really unlock Siakam, you sort of have to move on from Miles Turner, because Siakam is going to be best fit as a weapon at the 5 in most cases. So it's just a really tough situation for Indiana. I think they're just
I just want to cut in real quick right there.
Yeah.
So the thing that's bothered me most about Turner in this series has actually been his rim protection. He's been, I've been
overrated rim protector. Overrated rim protector.
I've been shocked at how easily Knicks players just go through him. Like it's not even going over him. They go through him at the rim. He gets his blocks sometimes, but man, just from I don't have the numbers to back this up, and I should have came prepared with the data. But it sure as hell feels like when he's at the rim, the Knicks don't feel like, oh, it's not a Rudy Gobert situation, Like even as Rudy Gobert is getting just clobbered by Jokic right now, you still feel like when Gobert is in those 1-on-2 situations, he forces snake dribbles, he forces resets. Guys won't even shoot, and maybe it's ignorance, but the Knicks do not seem like a team that's afraid to shoot. But I want to go back to something you said about the 5-out team, because this is why, and I'm saying this as someone who actually is leaning closer to your side of the trade in hindsight. I'm not giving myself credit for that. I was wrong at the time, or if I was wrong at the time. But this is why I leaned the other way to start. Why isn't Turner capable of being a spacer in a quote unquote 4+1 with Siakam? What to you makes it different? Because you're talking about the ideal team build around Siakam. Why can't Siakam be in that mid-post spot with Turner as one of the spacers? He's a great shooter. And if anything, a team like the Knicks that is hesitant to put anyone but Isaiah Hartenstein on Turner because they don't like, size cross matches. If anything, there's more value to him being one of the spacers because he directly pulls multiple big men out of the paint.
Yeah, so there's a few reasons in my opinion. So one, his inability to attack closeouts is going to be a problem for them. And there's a big difference if, let's say, Pascal Siakam is your 5. You don't have any 5s attacking closeouts. Like, first of all, your 5 is essentially out guarding on the perimeter, which is already terrible for the defense. And now they're in a situation where they have no rim protection. And also they're at a disadvantage with having some kind of 5 try to guard Pascal Siakam, which is horrifying for any defense. For Miles Turner's sake, again, his inability to attack closeouts if he's the one spacing, and also he's not a good passer. Like, he's not a good processor. He's not a good passer. If he was better at passing and he made quicker decisions and made the right decisions a lot of the times, I would be more amenable to that idea, but I just haven't seen it from him. Obviously, I'm not just talking about assists. His assist percentage has been low throughout his career, which makes sense. But I just, in terms of his ability to process and just watching him on the court, I don't think he makes quick decisions. I don't think he makes great decisions. So he's not going to be the fastest, like, swing guy. He gets it. The defense closes out to him on a rotation, and he gets it to the open guy as soon as it's necessary to take advantage of the advantage that's been created. I don't see Miles Turner as that kind of a guy. So those are two of the primary reasons. And the last reason I'll say is that this requires Pascal Siakam to have the ball a ton. And when Pascal has the ball a ton, you're taking it out of Tyrese Halliburton's hands. That is the biggest problem here. You're taking the ball out of the better player with the ball in their hands to put it in the worst player with the ball in their hands to give him an ability advantage and to give him a bigger and better impact. And that's just not the best way to do it. If you do it the way where Siakam is the one who is spaced out in some cases, or in the actions and pick and roll actions, then Tyrese Halliburton has the ball primarily, and then you don't have any of these issues. So in my opinion, if they're going to really make this work, it's not going to work with Turner at the 5.
It's sort of similar to game 2 of Nuggets Timberwolves. Aaron Gordon had like 15 points in the first half on 90% shooting, and the Nuggets scored like 35 points. And there were people who were like, look at Aaron Gordon's stats. How could he be the one that's hurting them? And it's like, Minnesota forced Denver to try to optimize Aaron Gordon. Do you not see what that is doing? How that is taking away from, look at what Nikola Jokic did last night. You are not letting him do that by prioritizing or forcing the opponent to prioritize Aaron Gordon. And like, this is what we talked about with the Knicks. People would say, oh, Josh Hart hit, he hit all these threes. And of course, if Josh Hart's going to hit 4 threes a night, this is a totally different story. The sustainability of that was always the question. But even when Josh Hart was like running pick and rolls, scoring inside the arc, it's like, Josh Hart needed to do all that just for his impact to tread water. And you could still have argued, even with him having a top, 5% outcome individually, it still was like a fringe net negative because of what it did to all of his teammates. Because of how Dante DiVincenzo and OG Anunoby never got any space to shoot. Because Jalen Brunson was always operating in a phone booth. You can't just look at this individual box scores and be like, yep, yeah, he must have been good. Look, 20 and 13. That's it. He must have been good. That's the end of the story. No, that's barely a chapter of the story. And with Siakam, it's the same thing. Like, it's almost like, I'm not going to say it's irrelevant, because look, like, if Siakam puts up 35 and 15 on 80% shooting, or obviously that's absurd, but you get what I'm saying. If he puts up really big numbers and leads a good offense by himself, it's tough to argue like, oh, well, he's hurting the team that way. But until he starts playing a style that meshes with the style that optimizes their most important player better, he's almost sort of going to be suppressing the team's ceiling in the macro.
Yep, I agree with all that. I think that that's a big problem for them to work out. And to be honest, I don't see the solutions. The solutions aren't on the horizon for me. And you could say part of it is because Halliburton is not flexible enough as a player potentially. We see Nikola Jokic make an adjustment in the Timberwolves series, which is that I'm just going to score and I'm just going to dominate you and I'm just going to score every single time and you're not going to be able to do anything about it because I'm going to be too efficient and no one's going to stop me. So now, you are opening things up for your teammates and they can score a lot more efficiently. It's not, hey, let's optimize Aaron Gordon. It's, hey, let's optimize Nikola Jokic despite what you want to do. And then everybody else will be optimized as a result. Whereas with for Tyrese Halliburton to be optimized, he needs particular conditions. He needs space. He needs space to operate. He needs guys who are going to run. He needs guys who are going to hit threes. He needs guys who are going to move, like a Buddy Hield that they got rid of. And it's just, I just feel like they went in the wrong direction. And to be honest, even if they win this series against the Knicks, somehow win the next 2 games, I don't think that they'll be vindicated in it. I don't think they'll be vindicated in it because this is a watered down Knicks team. And I think most of us agree if the Knicks had OG Anunoby, the Pacers would have no chance in this series. And that is consistent with what we saw early in the series and consistent with what we've seen for the Knicks all season. So they're not a top 2 team in the Eastern Conference. It's more of a flash in the pan like we saw from the Miami Heat last year. And I think they're in a tough spot. If you want to add anything in there, I have another thing I want to get to, but yeah, you could jump on that one.
I just want to say, I think we both know what the solution is for the Pacers. It's to build a time machine and go back and trade for OG Anunoby instead of Pascal Siakam. I can't.
Oh my God! Yeah,
I can't believe it. I can't believe they were like I'm just picturing like a world where you're like a low level assistant in the front office, and the GM comes in and he's like, guys, we're looking at a Toronto Raptors, and you're like, fuck yes. And they're like, Pascal Siakam, and you're just like looking around for the cameras, like, no, wrong guy. Like the Walter White meme in the car. No.
Oh man.
Because the thing is that not only would them trading for OG Anunoby have made them much better than they are right now, but it would have made the Knicks much worse. It would have made the Knicks worse.
Yes.
Like having OG and your rival having a player who is a perfect fit for you is one of the worst possible outcomes. Halliburton and OG Anunoby, keeping Obi Toppin in the starting lineup, keeping that moving, keeping Miles Turner, having all shooting on the court, all movement, but now you have one of the best wing defenders in the entire NBA. I mean, I would have you make the starting lineup Nembhard, Halliburton, OG Anunoby, OG Toppin, and Miles Turner. I would have no problem picking them in the Eastern Conference Finals right now. And honestly, I'd give them a live shot to beat Boston. I'm not saying they'd be a favorite, but I'd give them a non-0% chance of beating Boston.
1,000,000%. It has to be. So there were a lot of rumors that Indiana was definitely interested in OG Anunoby. It sounds like the price was too high. Whatever the price was, you should have paid it. It doesn't make any sense. Like I can't imagine a scenario. Imagine going to, okay, I don't want to make an analogy because it's going to make Pascal Siakam seem like he's not a good player. Pascal Siakam is a really good player, very effective, almost impossible to stop kind of one-on-one in these mid-range-ish situations. Pascal Siakam's a very good player. OG Anunoby fit the Indiana Pacers like a glove. We did a post from Hot Hand Theory about it based on something that you pointed out, which is that OG Anunoby and the Pacers and Tyrese Halliburton were a match made in heaven, like a dream match. And it was perfect and it was flawless and it worked. He helped with their weaknesses defensively. You have one of the best wing defenders in the league and the entire world right now, on your team to support Tyrese Halliburton's weaknesses the way that OG does for Jalen Brunson. And then you have somebody who is completely lethal from the corners, who you can just post up in the corner and Tyrese Halliburton can work. And you can't double, you can't just be lazy with your rotations or he's going to punish you every single time. It's such a perfect match that whatever the premium was to go from trading for Siakam to OG, they made a big mistake by not paying it, a huge mistake. And, I thought that at the time, and I think they're going to look back at that and kick themselves for a really, really long time. So totally agree.
And remember, OG is closer to Halliburton's like age timeline. Siakam turns 30 this year, man. Like,
Yep.
look,
No,
Siakam's
no, no.
game.
Siakam is 30.
Right. Oh, I meant he turned 30 this year.
Yeah, he turned 30.
Sorry. Look, his game isn't dependent on athleticism. I actually think he'll age relative to the entire league. I think he'll age above average, but his prime years are still dwindling, and Halliburton is super young, really good already. And if he's going to improve at the rate that you want him to improve, and he's going to start, joining the fringe MVP conversations, you want a co-star with him who is going to be on the same timeline and who fits. OG Anunoby checks both those boxes, and Siakam definitely doesn't check the age box. The jury is still out on whether he'll ever check the fit box. I'm a little bit more bullish on his ability to do so. But the big if is, does the team even realize it? Like, you never even know. Like, I don't mean that condescendingly, but who knows if they are like, if they or Pascal Siakam himself is open to hearing it, but who knows if they understand the true value of synergy and how much better this team would be if Pascal Siakam just almost took a step back so that the team could take a couple steps forward.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense, but I don't see it coming. I don't see them maxing out Siakam and then that happening. So I think the only recourse is Siakam to work with whoever freaking taught LeBron James how to shoot this offseason. That's probably the only way that they can go. Pay LeBron James shooting coach whatever he wants, give him a blank check. Whoever took LeBron from 32% shooting to 41% shooting this past year. So I can't imagine any other solution. Something I wanted to add and talk about specifically is Isaiah Hartenstein. Isaiah Hartenstein, the Knicks are going to bring him back. I'm very confident in saying that. I think that they have to. It might sound like hyperbole what I'm going to say, but I really think it's not hyperbole. I think this was the best and most impactful game of Isaiah Hartenstein's career. The thing that we talked about with Mitchell Robinson a lot, his offensive rebounding, is that there's so much value in it in that he does it by himself. So your transition defense is not affected when Mitchell Robinson is gathering all of his offensive rebounds. And actually, in some ways, the transition defense can be enhanced because, 1 to 2 opponents need to hang back and fight with him off on the boards. For instance, we know the famous Obi Toppin leak out. A guy like Obi Toppin is not able to do that when you have to fight to end the defensive possession. On the other hand, if you have 3 guys trying to get offensive rebounds and they don't get it, now you're at a severe disadvantage in transition. In game 4, the Knicks gave up 14.2 points per 100 possessions in transition. 14.2 points per 100 possessions in transition. For reference, the best transition team in the NBA during the regular season scored 3.8 points per 100 possessions in transition. The Knicks gave up 14.2. Part of that was the Knicks having too many guys crashing the offensive glass, like I just talked about. Part of it was turnovers and letting the Pacers run off of turnovers, for sure. And part of it was the Pacers playing off of Precious Achiuwa, which created these cross matches coming down the court in transition, because automatically Precious is already far away from his man when the possession changes to the other side because they're playing off of him. So now when, let's say, Pascal Siakam is guarding him, he gets the rebound. Precious can't match up with him because he's on the other side of the court. Now there's cross matches everywhere. You have Jalen Brunson trying to guard Pascal Siakam in transition, and that's night. In this game, the Knicks transition defense off of live rebounds dropped precipitously. And by that, I mean it improved. And a big reason for that is Isaiah Hartenstein just beasting on the boards by himself. He just did it by himself. The Pacers consistently needed 2 players to box out Isaiah Hartenstein. And in some scenarios, it didn't even work. They weren't able to do it. His impact on the game through his rebounding on both ends, it served to, 1, slow down the Pacers' biggest weapon in the series, which is their transition game. 2, give the Knicks a ton of extra shots and helped result in a game where the Knicks took 29 more field goal attempts than the Indiana Pacers. You are not beating anyone who has 29 more chances to score than you did. You're just not. Like, Geoff, you and I talked about the scenario where you have a shootout with TJ McConnell and we laughed about the idea that you'd beat TJ McConnell. I know you're a good shooter. Guess what? If you have 29 extra shots versus TJ, I'm putting all my money on Geoff. I'm putting my life savings on Geoff if he has 29 more shots than TJ McConnell. You can't win like that. It's just not possible. And last thing.
Did you see his heart though? Did you see his heart last night? I don't know. That guy has got some grit. I don't want to fuck with that guy. I think a cool like side plot of this series is how all the Knicks clearly like him. Like going into this series, I would have picked him. I would have picked him as the guy most likely to annoy Knicks fans. You know, like he's got like that Patrick Beverly to him, but like all the Knicks just sort of respect how like that kind of sums up this Knicks team. Like they're like, nah, we don't want that prima donna bullshit. Like they like that McConnell like tries hard and is just like super like gritty and annoying. So yeah, keep going. But I just had to shoot McConnell some praise because he opened the pod with me. I mean, I think he's had a really cool series.
I totally agree. Love TJ and what he's added and the toughness and the number 3 thing I was going to mention about what Isaiah Hartenstein contributed was just the energy and toughness and life, and he put them back in bully mode, and that matters. Like we saw it translate over in so many ways, even when Dante gets in Turner's face or gets back in Turner's face, when Hartenstein's swatted Isaiah Jackson away in the most disrespectful way possible with the back of his hand. And then just his overall impact defensively, protecting the rim, his passing, racking up 5 assists to 1 turnover. He only had 2 fouls in this game. We know he's been prone to fouling at some points. And his screening can't be understated. It was so sharp and consistent, getting guys off of Brunson's body and allowing Brunson to attack slight advantages that he might have. And so, in my opinion, just all things equal, like I've seen Isaiah Hartenstein play dozens, nearly hundreds of games, probably hundreds of games at this point. This was his best and most impactful game in his entire career, in my opinion.
I don't think that's crazy at all. There's so many numbers that can, reinforce the points you made. I thought the possessions point was so interesting because the Knicks shot 46% in game 5. They shot 33% in game 4. So already, in game 4, there were way more offensive rebound situations available. They got fewer offensive rebounds in game 4 than game 5, despite more size and more offensive rebounds available. So there were so like we talked about trade-offs earlier. There were all these points that were made that were so short-sighted and so honestly just not true. People talked about Miles Turner. Miles Turner is going to dominate the offensive glass if they don't have Precious Achiuwa at power forward. 0 offensive rebounds in this game. 0. In a game the Pacers shot like shit. He got 0 offensive rebounds. So you want to talk about trade-offs? Let's not act like that's the same as Deuce McBride's shooting versus Precious Achiuwa's shooting. Like, and Hartenstein was just to bring it back
part of it real quick to enhance your point even more. Part of it real quick, and we texted about this. It doesn't even matter if Deuce McBride makes the shots or not. It's the value of him existing on the court, creating the space for Jalen Brunson. You're not just leaving Deuce McBride open. You're not like, well, that guy's not going to beat us from 3. Leave him wide open. Like, he's not that kind of guy. You're going to guard him. So even if he doesn't make the shots, he's adding value. Whereas if Precious is not getting the offensive rebounds, he's not. Like, it's very results-based contingent as opposed to on the situation with McBride where it's like, the process adds value in of itself. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, but the space and the process don't matter. All Brunson needed to do was get healthy. He's healthy. He's got more lift on his jump shots. The space doesn't matter. Sorry. Dude, it's just you can only take so much of this bullshit, man. Like it's just so crazy. 12
for the record, Brunson, I don't know if he's healthy or not healthy. I don't think his health has been dramatically different from the beginning of the series to this point in the series. I don't think it's fluctuated on a game day-to-day basis. Is my
it would make no sense. There's no logic behind that. And like I think he's playing hurt still. I think he's still clearly hurt.
Yeah, agreed.
Which makes what he did last night even more incredible. Like I don't think he's going to be healthy again until the offseason.
Agreed.
I don't think we'll hear about it because that's Brunson's personality. I think he's just like, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to give it everything I have. And, if I need surgery, I'll get surgery in the offseason. And he's not going to play for Team USA because apparently they decided that the best American guard shouldn't be on Team USA, which is interesting tactics, but I digress. 12 offensive rebounds for Isaiah Hartenstein, 5 assists. Like, he's already like when he started with the Knicks last year, they were like, everyone was like, oh, we got Jokic East now, like this is gonna be like Jokic, we're gonna run the show through him. That hasn't exactly transpired. And Hartenstein had a rough patch, early in last season because it took him a minute to figure out what role the Knicks expected from him. But for him to be malleable enough to just thrive in this new role and find all these new ways to impact the game positively in a way that isn't diminishing, that is just perfectly additive to this team. He plays defense at an elite rate, again, second in the entire NBA in defensive EPM. He offensive rebounds, he offensive rebounds at an insane rate. I think he was like in the 97th percentile this season in offensive rebound rate. He's a great passer still. Just because he's not being used as a hub as much as he was as a Clipper, doesn't mean that his passing, his screening, his kickouts on the offensive rebound, like that one play, the Burks shoots the corner 3, Isaiah Hartenstein steals the offensive rebound and finds Burks on the relocation. That's just that type of processing, that type of accurate passing. He hit him right in the shooter's pocket. That was butter from the moment it hit Alec Burks' hands. Hartenstein has been incredible all season. Speaking of guys playing hurt, I mean, he only played 22 minutes last night. I bet he's still a little bit hurt. And, while we're giving kudos to Thibs, we talk about giving kudos to Thibs for stuff that he probably should have been doing all along. This is something that I don't think anybody would have expected from him, that I think was like almost like icing on the cake. I loved that he played Precious almost the entire second quarter at center. I don't even know if he brought Hartenstein back in. If he did, it was very late in the second quarter. Hartenstein only played 22 minutes in the entire game. Sure, a lot of that's because of garbage time. But even if he played the entire
Hartenstein played 31 minutes in the game. 22 minutes in the previous game.
I'm looking at game 4. But my point is that even had he played the rest of garbage time, it would not have been the drastic minutes that we saw during that stretch in January where he initially got hurt. And, if you don't want to project forward too much, you don't want to assume the series is over, because the series isn't over. For everything we've said, Indiana is a dangerous team. They can get hot. It's not impossible to see them winning game 6 at home. Or it's definitely not impossible to see them winning game 6 at home. They're 5.5 point favorites right now.
They'll be favorites. Yeah, exactly.
They're favored to win that game, and anything can happen in game 7. But as you look forward, if you want to, sneak ahead and look at a potential Boston Knicks series, Precious Achiuwa is going to matter in that series playing center. He's going to be able to give them minutes, and Isaiah Hartenstein is going to matter. And so for Thibs to understand that these two can matter separately, it's not just, oh, they both matter, so let's just throw them both out there together. No, they're different players. They bring different things, and they can matter one at a time. I think that's huge, because I think that what we saw last night was kind of the best version of both players. And that's the first time in a long time that the Knicks have seen that for their team in terms of their two centers.
Yeah, 100%. And we touched on this, but another one of the advantages of Precious Achiuwa not starting at the 4 is that he can be your real full-time backup 5. And against the Indiana Pacers, it works really perfectly. It's an advantageous situation. This is something we talked about in our preview of this series, is that Precious Achiuwa at the 5 could be an advantage, even ahead of Mitchell Robinson. So obviously the Knicks have no choice but to put Precious at the 5 ahead of Mitchell Robinson. But even if they did have the option, it's possible that Precious would be a better option for this series. So that really works out great, and it allows Hartenstein to rest. It allows Precious to use all of his tools and advantages that he has on the defensive end in a spot that allows him to be to provide his optimal impact. So it really works excellently all around, and I think that that's just something that we saw and will hopefully continue to see. From a Knicks standpoint, hopefully they'll continue to see moving forward. But to your point, this series is not over. The Pacers are completely dangerous. The Pacers will likely win game 6. The Pacers will likely win game 6. They're favored in that game. They're going to be at home. there's some adjustments that they can start to make, knowing now that the Knicks are going small and going 4 out with Brunson. 3 out around Brunson and Hartenstein.
3.5 out.
3.5 out, because Hartenstein's still dangerous out on the perimeter, right? Like his dribble handoff game, you can't just leave him wide open. He's not that will come with a consequence as well. So 3.5 out. It's still going to be a problem for Indiana, but at the same time, at home, they're going to run more. Their players are going to have more energy. The crowd is going to be going crazy. This is the biggest playoff game, the biggest game for in Indiana since I don't know when, decades at this point. So this is going to be a tough environment. And so you win game 6 if you're the Pacers, you go back to the Garden for game 7, and it's not an ideal situation for sure, because the Garden was completely absurd in terms of its energy, but anything can happen in a game 7, and we all know that. So you definitely can't consider this series won by any means. Do you have any thoughts about what, and I'm putting you on the spot, do you have any thoughts about what the Pacers could do to adjust to what they've seen with Deuce McBride starting, understanding the circumstances now? The Knicks are going to be pretty small. The Knicks are going to try to, and Isaiah Hartenstein particularly is going to try to really beast them on the offensive rebounds by himself. There were some points late in the game. Actually, it's really funny. Late in the game, there was a moment where I think it was Ben Shepherd and Miles Turner both go to block out Isaiah Hartenstein. This is when the game is pretty much at hand in the fourth quarter. They both look for Isaiah Hartenstein's body and try to fight with him to keep him off the board. Hartenstein doesn't get to the rebound, but slaps it off of Ben Shepherd or whoever it was that was helping to box him out. And the Knicks still retain possession. They could not stop him from getting rebounds with two adult human beings who are both NBA-sized level play. Like, I don't know what the adjustment is, but I don't know if you have any thoughts about what they do other than just hopefully make more shots and push the pace more.
So, yeah, I mean, this is overly simplistic, but as we talked about, sometimes it is simple. They just have to play better to start. That would be my number one adjustment. I mean, you're not going to win if Tyrese Haliburton plays like he did in game 5. He needs to play better. He's probably hurt too, just like Brunson is. Doesn't matter. You got to play better. If you're out there, you're expected to play as to the best of your capabilities, and Haliburton didn't come close to doing that in game 5. The second thing, and there's proof of concept of this, you mentioned it, you just do a better job of keeping Hartenstein off the offensive glass. They've actually done a pretty admirable job throughout the series. There's a reason we're being so profuse in our praise of Hartenstein, because he had been kind of invisible through the first 4 games of the series. He had not helped at all. He looked way more like, oh, maybe the injuries are hampering him. He looked tired. And whatever it was, whatever he was able to bring in game 5, the Pacers, if anything, enabled it. So they need to do a better job rebounding. As Thibs always says, it's a team thing. It's not an individual thing. You gotta box out. You gotta take the guys off the glass. The third thing, I think we saw a little bit of it last night, you gotta treat Josh Hart as if he's the new Precious Achiuwa. That's the best way you can still create those uncomfortable situations for the Knicks if you're willing to live with the variance of open Josh Hart shots. And they started to do it a little bit towards the end of the second quarter and in the third quarter last night. But I think you go back and you look at the Sixers tape, and you look at what the Sixers were able to do with an extremely limited team to really push the Knicks and and hurt the Knicks offense. And I think that if you're the Pacers, stopping Jalen Brunson from creating these open shots for DiVincenzo and Deuce McBride, and keeping those are the 3 best offensive weapons the Knicks have. It's Jalen Brunson in isolation. It's open threes from Deuce McBride and Dante DiVincenzo. It's Isaiah Hartenstein on the offensive glass creating these things. Those are the 3. And if you want to throw in, a 3.5 to 4, it's Josh Hart in transition. I assumed we were talking, mostly half court offense, but I do want to give Josh Hart his roses too, because the Knicks offense that goes into team offense, and the Knicks offense wouldn't be as good or it wouldn't be what it is without the contributions from Josh Hart in transition. So if you're the Pacers and you're trying to make them less effective, those are the areas I would attack.
I think those are all great points, and I'd imagine that the Pacers are going to come with some, if not all of those, for Game 6 and beyond. So we'll see how it goes. The last thing I wanted to get your thoughts on, before we kind of wrapped up. So there was just some reporting that just happened pretty recently from Shams, basically suggesting the Knicks want to lock in Thibs to a long-term extension, and that the next deal will probably or likely approach 8 figures, something like $10 million per year or more. I'm not sure the number of years or anything like that, but this is some reporting from Shams that seems pretty well sourced. There's been talks about Thibs being extended earlier in the year, and this seems to be more concrete stuff coming out. So what is your immediate reaction to this idea? You and I have both been, I'm not going to characterize what your thoughts on Thibs are. I've had a lot of critiques for Thibs. I think he's a good coach. Never thought he was an elite coach. Especially in terms of raising the potential ceiling for the team and being the person to bring the Knicks to a championship. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on some of these rumors, and if we see that moving forward?
This was strategic by the Knicks. I mean, they're very media savvy, as you can tell. If you just look on Twitter right now, the vibes are so good. The vibes are so high right now in Knicks verse. Like, can you imagine if the Knicks lost Game 6 and 7 and then they released that? What the vibes would be like? Wait a second,
Yeah.
But of course, you're not going to be the asshole who goes on Knicks Twitter right now and you're like, well, wait a second here, folks. That's what this podcast is for. That's what we're here to do. We're here to be the wait a second guys. To me, it tells me if they ultimately do that, it tells me that the front office, if the Knicks don't, succeed ultimately in the macro of the season, it tells me that the front office is ready to write it off again as the responsibility of injury. Like injuries are the primary factor. They think that Thibs can get them over the top. That's what it tells me. It tells me that if they put the team that they've built with OG Anunoby and probably Julius Randle next season, they think that Thibs can be the guy to coach them over the top. And all I would say is, to me, we still haven't seen anything that shows us that he can be that guy. Like, I don't feel any differently about Thibs than I did at the start of this playoffs. I feel that he's a coach who will get the most out of the players in his rotation, the most effort. I don't think he'll always maximize the players' skill sets, but I do think he'll get the most effort. I think he gets elite buy-in. I think he builds elite defensive schemes. I think he's a defensive genius, absolute genius, in a way that I can only barely grasp onto. Like, I'm sure when I watch Knicks defense and I'm like, holy shit, like, this is great, I'm probably only seeing half the picture. This is how deep a level of respect I have for the defensive acumen and defensive mind of his. I do think that to win a championship, you still need things in terms of removing bias and going into each series almost with a fresh slate. There are very few teams, and honestly, each season there's maybe one team that can go into a series and be like, no matter who they're playing, they can just be like, we're going to play our game. Nothing else matters. And Thibs has grown and he adjusts, but it still seems like he's prone to overvaluing his intuition. And look, if you're a smart person or a smart basketball mind, it seems clear to me that Thibs is, there are positives. We talked about trade-offs earlier. There are positives to valuing your intuition, but is it the optimal play in the long run? The jury's still out on that. And so I'm not saying don't extend Thibs, but if they're willing to extend him now, I'm a bit curious why they didn't just extend him when the season was over. Why it's what they've learned now that they didn't already know. Because to me, it's it's the same thing. The Knicks are up 3-2 in this series, and it took him 3 games to realize that Precious Achiuwa can't play power forward. Stuff like that. That's just a lone thing. You know, there are all sorts of, to me, things that Thibs does that just give you a little bit of pause where you're like, okay, he obviously has his strengths as his coach, but are the weaknesses, are the deficiencies too exploitable at the highest level?
Yeah, I think that was really well said. And I think, I largely agree. I think Thibs is a really good coach. He's gotten better each year, in my opinion, like you mentioned about some of his growth. But what I will say, and like you said, we're here to be the wait just a second, guys. And I know it's like not consistent with the vibes in Knicks land. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't extend Thibs if I want to win a championship. It's not what I would do. It's not the direction I would go. I do see Thibs as not quite like a Mark Jackson type of figure, but more along those lines than I do as the one to kind of take them over the top. For some of the reasons you suggested, some of the biases he seems to be wedded to, some of the choosing kind of short-term goals over long-term goals. The Knicks are extremely, extremely talented. I think it's underestimated how talented they are. Leon Rose put together an elite group of basketball players. They really are extremely deep. And I think that what they're saying and what they're seeing and what they're implying is that Thibs has been able to take this group of, injured ragtag guys and get them all the way to a point where they're on the cusp of an Eastern Conference final. And I don't really see it like that. I mean, definitely the injuries have been extremely tough, but I don't see it in such a way where it's like Thibs has done something that no other coach or most other coaches or a great coach could not do with a team that I think is extremely talented and extremely deep. And to be able to survive the injuries that they've survived, I think other coaches that are really, really good, not good coaches or like okay coaches or decent coaches, really good and really great coaches could do this kind of performance to have these kinds of results with the team that they have. And so, from a Knicks perspective, you want them to see a championship. I don't think this is the direction that I would go, but we'll see. We'll see. We'll find out. It could be wrong, and that'd be great for the Knicks. And but I don't think it's a no brainer by any means. I'm not saying it's a silly decision for them to extend them. I'm just saying where I come down on it in terms of my view of the probabilities is I probably wouldn't do it from a Knicks perspective.
It does feel like this summer finally is like the fork in the road for the Knicks. In the sense of, I mean, they might extend Julius Randle too. And then they're really locked in. They're really locked into this group with this coach. And look, coaches get fired all the time into their contract. Like an extension doesn't actually mean anything anymore.
That's
especially because it's James Dolan's money. Like honestly, Dolan could extend Thibs tomorrow. Randall could come back, have an all-star season, and if the Knicks underperform in next postseason, that could just be it. Like, I'm not saying it would be it. I don't think it would be. I'm just saying it's not impossible for a coach who's extended.
That's a great point. Yeah, it's Frank Vogel. I mean, we saw it happen with Frank Vogel. So yeah, that's a great point. And actually, real quick, because you're just making me think, it may be more valuable in what it signals to the organization to do the extension, even if you have to undo it at some point later by just paying money. It may be more valuable in what it signals in terms of what the Knicks have been doing as a team to do that from a symbolic standpoint, even if it doesn't work out from a strategic standpoint. I think that there's a ton of value to that, and not something I considered. So I think that's a really great point, Geoff.
Thank you. Well heard by you too.
And well heard by me. Let's not leave that out.
Well heard by you. I still would wait because I would just wait until the season's over. The series isn't over. Do you know how bad it would look for the Knicks if they extended him today and then they lost game 6 and 7? That would just be ridiculous.
Like, well, I don't think they're going to do it before the series is over. I think it's like these are rumors about what they're going to do like after the season ends is what I think.
Yeah, but okay, if they all but in principle extend him today, like, I mean, if Shams tweets something, like, it's not just based on that. It's not baseless,
Of
like
course,
he's basically extended right now, like,
for sure.
And I just, I would at least wait until the season over. That's a rough look. And I'm saying that for my own personal health too, because if they lose game 6 and 7 and then extend him, and the entire offseason is just about how injured the Knicks were and how next. Oh my God, I was look. Social media. See you later. I will see you guys in September or October or whatever if that happens. Fuck that, man. Just win game 6, please.
Oh man, that's hilarious. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have too many more super important thoughts to get out. Anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
I mean, I have tons of super important thoughts just rattling around in here, but I've got nothing on the cusp, so I'm happy to say goodbye for today.
All right, that that sounds good, and we'll hear all this several tweets from Geoff, of all the things that he forgot to mention on the podcast over the next 24 hours. Yeah, so thanks so much for everybody for listening. If you've gotten this far, you must at least enjoy the program to some extent. And if that's the case, then please subscribe. We're trying to hit our 500 subscriber milestone, which is really important to us. It makes us a YouTube partner. Everything comes downstream from that. So that would be really awesome. If you want to just hit that subscribe button, hit a like if you want. Less important, but helpful for sure. But yeah, thank you so much for everybody for listening. It was a really fun episode and looking forward to getting back with you all hopefully next week. This has been Hot Hand Theory.